Back today, we're going to draw a planar head. This was it's a 3D model that's offered for sale, and I will credit the artist in the description. A planar head is a head that's been simplified. The contours have been simplified into easily visible planes, and it helps you understand the form a little better. And more importantly, since we're working on 3/4 views, a planar head is going to help us understand the foreshortening, because we have a lot more clearly defined landmarks that are visible on the head, and so we can see, for example, that this surface completely disappears on that side. We can see that these symmetrical forms of the eye sockets, like on this side and this side, are vastly different sizes because of foreshortening. It's easier to see that the eyes are very different sizes, again, because this one is strongly foreshortened and this one isn't. And honestly, this is the first time I've drawn something like this with a class, but we're going to see how it goes. It's going to give us a lot more landmarks to refer to than we would see on a natural person. We're going to begin, as usual, by thinking about the form of the cranium. And remember that don't start drawing yet. The cranium terminates around where the bottom of the nose is, and around where the bottom of the ear is. So we can see the head is tipped up slightly. So what we have here is, remember, the cranium from the front is a circle, and the cranium from the side is a kind of a racetrack form, like that. And the cranium we're seeing here is a slightly foreshortened racetrack that's tipped up a little bit. Can you see that? It's like on a slight angle like this, and it's not quite a circle, but it's not as, remember, the racetrack in a side view, it's about 20% wider than it is tall, 20 to 25%. This is just a little wider than it is tall. You see that? So it's going to be helpful to kind of start with that kind of a form. So we can start drawing now. We're going to draw something like this. It may not actually be tipped quite that much, because the cranium on this side is going to come down a little more. And now we're looking for the jaw. Remember, the cranium and the jaw define the boundaries of the face. And the jaw inserts right in front of the ear hole, which is way towards the back of the cranium in this view. And something like this. This line is almost vertical. It just tilts in a little bit. This angle is going up at about 20 or 30 degrees. Here's the ear hole. And this is a sort of crude representation of the skull. Now, we've already established that the nose comes down about as far as the bottom of the cranium, so notice that the bottom of the nose is about level with the ear hole. I'm going to pull a horizontal over to show you. That's the bottom of the nose. There's the ear hole. So bottom of the nose is right about here. And I'm going to do a simplification of the nose to show that I'm looking up into it. The nose is slightly above my eye level, so I like to do a kind of a schematic nose like this. I'm accounting for the fact that this angle's a little bit this way. I'm not drawing the actual form, I'm drawing a simplified sort of the undersurface of the nose. And now I'm going to look for the eye line. And the eye line is not exactly in the middle of the head. Can you all see that? Like this distance from here to here is significantly more than this distance from here to here. Does anyone have an idea why that might be in this pose? Yeah, because we're looking up at the head. So the top of the head is foreshortened. Bottom of the head is closer to us, like this. So I'm going to just estimate the location of that eye line. Notice that its angles down just a little. That's that perspective thing we talked about last time. The nose line is almost, maybe angles down just a little, and the mouth line, which is about a third of the way down, is pretty much horizontal. So I might end up adding just a little height to my cranium just to get this proportion right. I feel like maybe I was running out of room there, but yeah, that feels better to me. Or maybe the eye line is just a little lower. We'll take some measurements in a minute. Okay, the bridge of the nose angles at about 30 degrees from vertical. Can you see that? And so we're going to go from the tip. Everyone be sure you kept the tip of the nose inside the cheek line, about this far back. And now we're going to go 30 degrees up. And it can be helpful to check your angle. You can close one eye and hold your pencil up along the angle that you drew and compare it. Just move your pencil across and see if it's the same angle as is represented in the motif. You see what I'm doing? If you just hold your pencil in a fixed position, that can be a useful little trick. And now I'm going to take advantage of some of these. Well, no, I don't want to jump ahead of myself. Let's locate the eyes. I think one iris is about here. Okay, let's do something a little different here. When I zoom in, you can really see all the features of this planar head that you would not see in a normal face. So we're going to draw the bridge of the nose. And you see how this model intersects with, it really shows the intersections of the forms a lot more clearly than you would see in a living model. So we've got the bridge of the nose here, and then arching up above the eye line is this honestly, does this represent the eyebrows maybe? And then under that is the eye itself. What I'm going to check is the back of the nose is here. If I pull a plumb line up from there, you see how the inside of the eye has to stay beyond the back of the nose like that. So that's the general location of that eye. This eye, as we can see very clearly, is disappearing behind the bridge of the nose, like that. And then this kind of eyebrow ridge goes over it like that. One nice thing about this model is when you draw a planar head, you don't have to worry too much about getting a likeness because it doesn't really look particularly like anyone. This is a relatively complex planar head. There's a lot of them that are where the forms are resolved into much simpler planes. So these are sort of fat pads under the eye. Here's this very complex intersection between the eye socket, the zygomatic process, and the cheekbone. And here's the sort of swooping form of the cheekbone and the way it intersects with some of the forms of the musculature around the mouth. And I'll do this other eye socket and then I'll take a break and come around and take a look. So here's this multiple folded forms of this eye socket and cheekbone emerging from behind it. So now we're going to get into what's actually happening with the nose. This is a nice representation of some of the cartilage in the nose. Cartilage takes specific forms just like bone does, but they're a little less regular than bone. So that's why our noses vary a lot more than our like femurs do. So here we have like this, I forget the name of this, but it's like a wing of cartilage that's typically found above the ala, and then below it we have the form of the ala, which is like this. And the nostril is behind the ala here, and we can see how it's not the ala but this upper wing of cartilage that hooks around to meet the philtrum underneath. here's the philtrum. It might be helpful to run another plumb line up. We can see that the philtrum is centered under this position of the bridge of the nose. Right there. And the central curve of the Cupid's bow is right under the curve of the philtrum. So that's like here. And if you're new to this, pay close attention. This is what people get wrong every time. See, this wing of the mouth to the left of that curve is about a third the size of this wing. And your brain is going to want to make them more like the same size. So make this side is really small. In fact, it's a little shorter than the center curve of the mouth. And this side is about 3 times longer than that. It goes way back here. And I can pull a plumb line here to show that the corner of the mouth is right under the corner of the eye. So you can do that. Check that too. You want to get in the habit of just checking horizontals and verticals on a regular basis. And the lower lip also very foreshortened on this side and much longer on this side. And now that we've found these 2 corners, we can pull this labial fold from the back of the ala, comes around, and it doesn't intersect the corner of the mouth. It goes outside the corner of the mouth like that. And on the other side, we're going to have the labial fold is going to define the muzzle form. This is like we can feel the dental arch wrapping around and intersecting with the upper lip like that. I'm going to just define my eyelids a little better. Those details are really, for the scale drawing that I'm doing, they're not going to be very well articulated, but, and the irises. If you're not too familiar with sculpture, this is, like I said, a 3D model, so the sculptor has represented the irises with basically inverted cones. Can you see what's going on there? And there's the pupil. And that is sort of the form that the iris takes. This little blob represents a highlight. But what sculptors do, they can't shade things light or dark, and so they dish in the irises like that to create a sense of darkness through shadow. Okay. So now we've got the forms of the chin. Here's that little shelf that we usually see between the bottom of the lower lip and the top of the chin. Here's the ball of the chin. Even if you and I don't understand what each one of these lines represent, drawing something like this does get us more into the habit of seeking plane changes as we're drawing and trying to understand the form in terms of plane changes. So it's a useful exercise. There are a lot of portrait artists who could probably name every one of these planes and have them all kind of memorized. I have a kind of intuitive familiarity with them, but not an analytical understanding, so apologize for that. So the reason my drawing looks kind of weird right now is because I haven't yet drawn the underside of the throat. This is really important. This surface here, which I'm going to do a first shading on, that's what gives the viewer the primary clue that we're looking up at the head, and it's important not to neglect that surface. It's not a surface that you tend to see when you look in the mirror, so a lot of people kind of forget that it exists and don't draw it. But you see how my drawing just suddenly starts making a lot more sense when I include that detail. And I'm feeling in my drawing, I'm just a little bit crowded with my ear hole position. It's probably just a little further back. If you're following me closely, you might have the same problem. But again, part of the way I'm able to measure that is because of all these helpful plane changes. I was kind of running out of room for this form here. And I'm going to pull some horizontals over to help me locate the ear precisely. So the bottom of the lobe comes down as far as the middle of the mouth. And the top of the ear is coming as far as like the lower eyelid. That's another clue that the head is tipped back. So you remember from intro to drawing that usually the bottom of the ear is level with the bottom of the nose, and the top of the ear is level with the top of the eye. So if this was a pure side view, the ear would be up here instead of being down here. In fact, it's probably a better practice to put the ear in a little sooner because it's such a valuable clue for your brain about what kind of an angle you're seeing the head at. So here's the basic form of the ear. I've located, the ear hole, the top of the ear, the bottom of the ear, then I just draw the form. And what I'm thinking about here is the basic angle of the form is like tipping back like that a little bit. I'm not crazy about the simplifications of this form because it's sort of, he sort of joins the helix to the tragus, which is anatomically a little bit incorrect, but we're just going to draw what we see here. So there's the tragus and the helix. Remember, the helix normally doesn't connect with the tragus. It curves in towards the center of the ear. And here's a little indication of the antihelix. what's nice is the way that the helix is shown with a hard overlap here, and then it turns into this soft inside curve as it goes around the back. I'm going to take another pause in a second, but I want to make some corrections on my cranium now that get a little more detail with the cranium. I'm noticing that, you see how I just simplified this into an inward curve, but from behind the ear, the cranium goes back a few degrees, which again is due to the angle of the head, and then it takes a slightly sharper turn and then goes up. And it might be useful to look for where the cranium peaks. It sort of peaks at this point right above the corner of the eye, so we're going to curve up, 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 and then down again. And that's a little more accurate representation of the cranium. You'll notice that when I first sketched the cranium, I sketched it lightly, and now that we are sort of nailing it down, we're using a darker line. That way we don't have to do a whole lot of erasing. And you may remember from intro what this muscle is. Sternocleidomastoidus starts at the sternum. It bifurcates to the clavicle, which it doesn't in this model, and it ends at the mastoid process, which is right behind the ear. And notice that on this side it's much skinnier because it's foreshortened and it's wrapping around the neck. So, and this little very simplified, this represents the clavicle and a little bit of trapezius muscle coming from behind. Okay, I'm going to pause again. The main shadow, as we already sketched, is this undersurface. There's a little bit of halftone along the back side of the neck. A little shadow under this cheekbone, underneath the eye socket here, and inside the eye socket on this side. It's frontally lit, which means the light source is really close to our position. So there aren't many true shadows. There's a true shadow underneath the ear, a little bit underneath the helix that we drew already, and a little bit behind the sternocleidomastoidus. And as you may remember from previous work, the shadows we draw dark, and the rest of our shading is what's called halftones. Oh, there's another little shadow underneath the bottom lip. So this is all drawn with full pressure. There's also a small shadow at where the lips meet, right above that crease, and a little more shadow over here on the left wing. Oh, also tip of the nose and the underside of the ala. So that we all used pretty strong pressure to shade. And everything else we see is halftones. Halftones are areas that turn away from the light, but they're not in true shadow. So this whole side of the face is turning away from the light, but still receiving some light. So I'm going to very lightly shade this whole side right up to the philtrum. And not touching the bottom lip. And the trick here is don't let your halftones compete with your shadows. They should not be as dark. This fold here, I'm going to shadow map it and then show it with a halftone. I'm hatching across the fold. You don't want to shade something like that. You don't want to shade it like this with the fold, or it'll look much too sharp. You want to shadow map it and then shade across like that. So don't do that. And there's a halftone under this whole cheekbone form. So this is a 3D model. It's not, so that it's sort of like drawing a sculpture. What matters about it, the thing to understand about it is that we're drawing an artist's representation of nature, and we're not drawing nature itself. And that can be really useful because even though it's sort of like copying a drawing, because we're seeing nature through the eyes of an artist. So we're getting all the benefits that we would get from copying nature directly in terms of our observational skills, but we're also getting the benefit of learning how another artist was seeing and understanding these forms. And as I think I mentioned last time, at the Academy of Beaux-Arts, your first year was spent drawing from prints, so drawing, which was the only way they had to reproduce drawings in those days, so it was basically drawing from other artists' two-dimensional work. The second year was spent drawing casts, which is drawing from other artists' three-dimensional work, and it wasn't until the third year that you would draw from live models, which is drawing directly from nature. Okay, there's a little bit more halftone inside this eye socket. This is usually an area of deep shadow, but not in this lighting situation. And just a little halftone along the side of the nose will bring out the highlight on the bridge. Because we're drawing on white paper today, the only way to show highlights is to shade all around them. So when you're doing your halftones, it can be more efficient to just look for where the highlights are and shade around them until they are kind of popping the way they do in the original. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching at home. We'll see you next time.